Before we get started in this episode, a quick announcement. As you know, I'm very passionate about acceptance and commitment therapy, and I also run a busy practice in Canberra. We're currently looking for psychologists who are registered in Australia to join our team, who are also passionate about learning about ACT. We provide supervision on a group and individual basis and training around ACT. So if this is you, if you're interested, please express your interest at strategicpsychology.com.au/careers. Look forward to hearing from you. And now back to this episode.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking. Yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
Welcome back to Better Thinking. My name's Nesh Nikolic, and my guest today is Renee Adair. Renee is director of the Australian Doula College, the Groundwork Program, and the ADC's charity arm, Doula Heart Network. She first began working with women and babies in 1994, and after the home births of her two biological children in 1998, she began studying and working as a doula and childbirth and early parenting educator. Renee then worked for the Australian Red Cross at a young women's health refuge in Sydney's East and set up an outreach program and childbirth and early parenting education program. Working with her colleagues, Renee helped produce the first research on doulas in Australia, which was published in the Journal of Perinatal Education in 2013. Renee has worked to change the way that we think about doula support, launching an End of Life Doula training program for the college in 2021, with a view for the wider community to see doula support through a broader lens, supporting all major life transitions, not just the birthing space. In 2019, Renee proudly partnered with Charles Darwin University to co-facilitate accredited doula training for Indigenous women in the remote First Nations community of Galwinku. She now sits on the official Galwinku steering committee to restore birthing on country. Renee has sat on the Consumer Advisory Board of the Australian College of Midwives, trained thousands of doulas, and supported hundreds of women, their partners and families through pregnancy, birth, early parenting, and end-of-life care over the course of her career. It was a real pleasure to learn more about what doulas provide and how we can use this incredible service. So please welcome Renee Adair. Renee, a big thank you for coming on to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me today, Nesh. It's a great pleasure.
I've been looking forward to catching up and picking your brain for a little while now, as I have recently been exposed to this, world of that doulas do, more work than just the beginning of life care and support, and hence why I reached out and thank you for taking the time. I'm so interested to find out, more about what doulas do, beyond just that, the first breath, I think, is what we called it a moment ago.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking forward to it. Subjects that's very dear and near to my heart.
Let's start with, if you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So predominantly I started out in natural therapies, became a qualified aromatherapist and Reiki practitioner, massage therapist. And I had two amazing home births 28 and 27 years ago. And that really got me very interested in, I suppose, the lack of support and good information that we had in Australia, predominantly around birth. I had, as I was growing up, a great interest in humanity. I guess I think I came out that way. Some of us do and some of us don't. And interestingly, I was always that person, that go-to when someone was in trouble or needy or in fact dying. And I realized in hindsight that I was probably doing end-of-life doula work even before I became a birth doula. More about that later. So after I had the kids, I decided I wanted to study to become an educator. For me, it was really about information. People needed more information around birth and how to have a really great birth experience. There was one amazing woman in Sydney training independent childbirth educators at the time, all those years ago, Marie Burrows, who still today is a very dear friend and mentor to me. And she ran a 2-year course, and I became a childbirth and parenting educator. What was interesting about her training at the time was we had to attend births, and I'd only ever been to my own. And I remember feeling quite like, why do I have to go and attend somebody else's birth, you know? And the word doula was not in existence then in Australia. We were just champions of birth, or, you know, coach. Some clients would call me coach.
I don't mind that, though. Champions of birth.
Champions of birth. Pretty cool. And we had to do 12 births, you know, to become qualified. And I remember going, it's still so vivid in my mind. I remember going to the very first birth as a poor person and going through the process of sitting with this woman and her partner, and the baby was born. It was a beautiful birth. And I remember feeling like I was going to drop to my knees. It was so holy and sacred. It just blew my mind. And I was hooked. So moved forward tons of years and started to think about a college after being to hundreds of births and working with people in all kinds of spaces in education. Created the college 15 years ago. And then I think it was probably 6 or so years ago now, where a friend and I were talking about some of the work that she had done, which was similar to mine, but doulaing at end of life. And so I decided we needed a course. We needed to train doulas and really look at how that was being put out in the world. As it turned out, end of life doulas have been around in different parts of the world, alongside birth doulas sometimes or not, for many, many, many years. And I feel like doulaing, hopefully that word will make it into the Oxford Dictionary at some point, has been around for centuries. It is that, you know, if you think about the village, you know, that was probably the wise woman who attended all the births, who attended families when someone was dying. You know, they had the herbs, they had the knowledge, they were not afraid, and they helped people step through that experience. You know, really birth and death are our greatest transitions in our lives. And the first and the last breath are the most sacred, and I think the most important. And how we are around the people who are giving birth or are dying is really the essence of what a doula does.
It's incredibly fascinating for me, you know, in particular about what that provides, because it's not just someone that's you know, taking you through the journey. It's someone with great experience and with a particular type of touch, you know, a particular type of approach, with a language set, with, you know, capacity to talk about expectations and set up, you know, what it might look like, and talk through the challenges or even the hopes and dreams, or, you know, the environment and the setup and what's to celebrate and what's not to potentially fear, and so on. So would you mind, and obviously I'm talking, you know, from such an academic point of view, so I don't know this from you know, having done this, I know this from what I think, and no one's here to hear what I think. I'm here to learn, to find out what does it mean to be a doula, and what is, you know, maybe we can start with the you know, the beginning of life, and then maybe even you know, progress to talking about, you know, the end of life. Something that came up that, you know, as a bit of a joke, you know, if there's a champion of birth, we don't want to put that to the end of life because we become a but thankfully we've dropped that. But
Thankfully we've got
what's
it.
it like? What's it like to be in the and what does this service provide? Because there's many of us who probably don't know anything about doulas and we might actually benefit. So I'd like to know more about it.
Okay, so maybe I'll start with what it's like for me to be in those spaces, and I certainly can only speak personally. I think it probably feels a little bit different for everybody that goes into this work. And interestingly enough, when students come to us at the college, at the ADC, there's such a vast driver that's brought them there. Whether that's they want to work in birth, they want to work in end of life, or they want to do both. Sometimes the motivation is that they may have had a pretty amazing birth experience, or it may have been the opposite, where they carry some trauma and, they feel like if they'd have had more information and perhaps had a doula, that may not have happened. Certainly there's no guarantees. And for the end of life, the students that come to us, the people that want to be working in this space have had similar stories to tell. They've either had a really amazing end of life experience with a loved one, or they see the huge gaps that needed filling in terms of their emotional, physical support. I get a rush going to work when I get woken in the middle of the night. And truth be said, winding down my personal one-on-one work over the last couple of years, because the Australian Doula College has been all consuming and we've grown so much. And I miss that. What I know is that the energy in the room, whether it's the first or the last breath, is very addictive. And I feel there's a conduit that's open from here to there. And there's a magic in that space that doesn't happen at any other time in our lives. And I feel an incredible privilege and honor to be in that sacredness, to be invited along to someone else's personal transition, and to be a part of their story, if only for a little while. It's a heart journey to be a doula, and it's not for everyone. I think it's a calling, and I think it calls out to you at some point, whether that sort of happened kind of naturally for me, and for others it happens through a situation or a moment in time, and that calling becomes very real.
It's lovely to hear you explain that in such beautiful words, but in particular that appreciation of being invited, that a family has said, would you be willing to support us in this, moment, which could be one of great excitement and celebration, and all the way through to anticipation and worry and fear and grief, but that invitation is very special, and obviously, as you described, I've never thought of it that way, that connection of whatever this life energy or life form is, that wherever it comes from, that there's in this moment our life is coming into the world, or our life is exiting at least the physical realm. And so that's a moment, and one that brings special energies, experiences around
it. Definitely so. And I feel that essence is what we have lost in those spaces, with over-medicalization of birth and death, and lack of choices and options for people in our country, in our culture. We can do birth and death a whole lot better. We've lost, I think, our way. As humans, we've taken the humanity and the feeling away from those experiences. just by the nature of how things have evolved with, through the years in Australia with hospital, most people dying, being born and dying in hospital. So there's a lot of complexities that come with that when you have to navigate a system in order to have a baby or to have a loved one die. That's a layer that really we never used to have. We were all born at home and we all died at home. And we were not afraid of that. We had people around us that looked after us and cared for us. And our loved ones cared for us after we died. We were laid out in the parlour. Auntie would be laid out in the parlour. Your family would know how to care for that body. So yeah, history has really complicated how we've moved into modern day, and well, rather it was less complicated. Now we've complicated it, moving it into modern day medicine, if you like, for lack of a better word there.
Do you feel that when you reference, some of the over medicalization, and obviously it's an important part of the modern world, and the miracles that medicine can bring, at the same time it can be sometimes a narrowing of what choices people are at least offered, that
Correct.
when these things occur, there's a model which says you can do A or B, and we're not necessarily hearing that there's a K, L, M.
That's exactly right.
You're kind of saying that the work of a doula is not as widely heard, understood, entertained as an option, and a doula can actually offer that, can talk about what are your options, that
right.
You have more say of your journey, whether
Correct.
it's the person, your body, whether it's the family. I assume the doula works a lot with families at the end of life, but that there's been a bit of a narrowing, and the doula world tries to address some of, or has always been there, but kind of has to now address some of that.
I think we do, and I think that's the gap that we're filling. Just statistically here in Australia, we have about 14% of people that are dying at home right now, and research suggests that about 75% of Australians want to die at home, but they don't have the support, or they don't know where to find the support, depending on where they live, to do that. So that's a huge gap, Nesh, right? I mean, most people are dying in hospital, or in aged care, and a lot of those people are often dying alone or on a shift with someone that they've never met before, and that's not okay. We are human spirit that needs compassion, kindness, and love at the end of our lives. And I feel that by pushing people into the system, we've lost that. We've lost the love. We've lost the compassion. Death, in the same way as birth is, it's being done, on clock. And whilst I understand that the people working in those systems, it is not their fault by any means that the system is that way, but I feel like we need to shake it up and do things differently. And doulas can play an enormous part in helping, as you mentioned, in helping families understand all of their options and choices. Maybe even make the suggestion that, did you know you could take your loved one home? I mean, people don't know that. I've worked with people when they're, sadly babies die. We have this concept that a end of life doula is purely for, someone in their 80s or 90s or 40s or 50s. But certainly as a doula, which was probably how my first enmeshment arose, was when the first client that I ever worked with lost their baby. You can take your baby home. And even the hospital staff, I've had a hospital staff say to me, you can't do that. And I'm like, it is perfectly legal. We just need the doctor's certificate, death certificate, and we can. and we can take your baby home for a few hours, and you can spend time with your baby. You can bath your baby. You can get photographs with your baby. You can have friends and family come for a small vigil for a few hours in your home, and give parents the opportunity to even have a few hours with their baby, place their baby in their crib, even though their baby is still, is a remarkable healing that they wouldn't get just being in a hospital room. So there's things that the doula can bring that, some people, even hospital workers, haven't thought about or know is possible.
Renee, that brought me to tears listening to that. Just being a dad and thinking about what that might feel like to lose a child, but the importance of knowing something like that, because you'd be in such shock. Like, you would have no idea. You'd in actual fact be looking at everyone around you saying, what do I do next? And as much as I'm sure that the system would try and look after you and care for you and say, take your time.
Indeed.
To know that you could take your child home and say, maybe I just need to take him home.
Nesh,
I
I know
you touched the button. I don't know why, but here I am.
Sweetie, I'm glad, and I hope that even a few people that are listening will be touched by that too, and perhaps can offer that suggestion should it occur with someone they know. Tragically, it happens, and there is a lot we can do. There's taking locks of hair, hand prints, footprints, photographs, anything. Making memories is critical in the few hours or days that it's possible to have your baby with you.
This is a real experience that having a doula, someone who's treaded that path previously, not necessarily through their own life, maybe so, but through the many lives that they've worked with, to know what are the options that parents, families, individuals can do in these precious moments, and they are very hard. I mean, even when everything goes, beautifully well, and you're gifted a child, for example, you still have no idea. You don't know. I mean, I remember when my daughters were, certainly my first daughter, when she was born, I didn't know was I allowed to hold her, because the obstetrician who came in the last seconds, was the one that caught the baby, so to speak. And then you're like, what happens now? You're looking at them.
Yes.
And if you don't have a plan, and thankfully we actually did a calm birth course.
Oh, great.
So we did actually have some, but even in that moment, we're like, you can take the baby away now. You're going to weigh him. What are we doing? And we were like, we want to do mum and bub, skin to skin, bonding, all that sort of stuff, and so on. I won't take you through all of that, but you've
seen it once or twice, yeah.
But that experience of planning, and if you have it planned, at least now, I mean, with the doula you would have, so maybe take us through, what does the doula do in terms of the planning? What are the sorts of things that you talk to clients about, that you think about? What are the considerations that obviously there's a lot in it, but a bit of a process, and then maybe we can jump to the end of life.
I can do that. If I can do that for both,
please.
Spectrums, for sure. As a birth and postnatal doula, I'm contacted at varying times during someone's pregnancy, and we usually work with couples or individuals in the last trimester. So we create a rapport and do planning around their birth. Usually about 3, maybe 4 visits in the lead up to around their estimated due date, help them do a birth plan, a wish list, if you like. talk about a plan B should things start to deviate. I might do some top-up education depending on what classes they've done or if they haven't done any at all, which is pretty critical. You know, we do so much planning in so many other aspects of our lives, you know, but we don't plan so much or get as educated around our births. It drives me a bit batty, I must confess. You know, I hear stories about people exploring prams and strollers more than perhaps doing their research about their care provider. I digress. So interestingly, then we're on call from 38 weeks. So I stick around home. I don't go too far and wait to get the call that that labour has kicked off. And then I will go usually to the home and work there until labour's really, really well established. So hopefully by the time we get to the hospital, or we call the midwife if someone's having a home birth, you know, mum, pregnant person is in really good, strong, active labour. Then we will transfer to hospital.
Let me just jump in there.
Yeah.
How incredible is that in terms of just reflecting? I remember, you know, looking at my wife and she's looking at me and we're both completely out of sorts going, okay, you've started to feel these contractions. What do we do? And, you know, then you're calling the hospital. And if you call them, you know, too much, they trigger off and they say, all right, you know, you have to come in, which is all too early. And, you know, then I'm trying to be the protective, you know, husband. So I'm saying, no, she's fine. And she's not so much in the background. So you don't have any confidence. You don't have any reference points either. So to have someone who's seen this day in, day out to kind of say, oh yeah, you know, this is what stage you're at and this is what we're likely to feel. And oh, that extra feeling, that's fine and normal. Let's get a cup of tea. Like that reassurance would be incredible.
Yeah, I think
I jumped in because I just thought, wow, that alone would be, you know, all the value in the world, let alone obviously everything else that you're explaining.
It's worth its weight in gold. You know, I think if you can get to hospital, you're going to be 8 centimeters dilated, you're less likely to have any intervention. And you also have someone with you that you've built rapport with, and you have a friendship growing, you know, likeness growing, you know, there's a trust formed there. So when you do transfer to hospital, if that's what you're doing, unless you're having a home birth with a midwife, then certainly you're that familiarity, you know. For the most part in Australia, when you rock up to have your baby, you don't know anyone. You've never seen the staff that are on before. And as you just mentioned, your OB, if you have one, comes in, you know, right towards the end when you're pushing your baby out. And that's
sorry to jump in again.
Yeah,
the truth is we're all scared of the medical system because we also are scared of people, right? And so, you know, I love what nurses do. I love what midwives do. I love what surgeons do and obstetricians and so on. Having said that, they're all people. And, you know, our human experience tells us, you know, we had the experience of the most incredible midwife who you know, happened to meet us as I was, you know, parking my car and actually walked my wife in. But we also had an experience, you know, midwife that was a bit abrupt and was not so compassionate, and that made us very scared about, well, is this what it's gonna look like for the next X amount of hours, right? And so to have someone that can protect you from that, or at least to give you reassurance that you've got, first of all, someone who's effectively embedded in the medical system, got the training, who, you know, will be respected in that room. All these things is like, oh my God, that again, you know, I had no idea that, you know, doula even comes in, so or can come in. So, oh wow, I'm sold, by the way. I mean, I'm not having any more kids, but maybe I'll need it sadly on the other, not sadly, on the other end to you know, do that in a beautiful way as well. But
Mm.
my apologies. Keep going.
No, it's great. I'm so glad you're so interested. I mean, I think it's important to mention too that because we don't do anything medical, we work alongside those professional
Yes.
people, and we, whilst we have that knowledge, and we really do come from that incredible compassionate space where if things start to deviate or outside of the plan, for example, we can take a step back and offer perhaps options and choices in those moments that aren't being, given in the first instance, or buy some time. And that doesn't often occur in people's minds either, that you can actually, as long as the baby's fine, there is no reason to rush things along.
And we also know that the moment the moment we jump into fear, right, we get in the way because we start contracting all of our muscles, which obviously is not helpful if you're trying to relax them so that a baby can come out. We also, we're looking for time because this is a process. And so if we kind of get narrow-minded because we've now got an adrenal response, to have someone there slowing it down and saying, this is okay, and we can talk it through, this is a conversation that is evolving in a process, that comfort alone, I can only imagine, obviously I don't have the research, you might be able to point to something, but will lead to, less of the cascading effects from, medical intervention potentially jumping in early, i.e., as you say, you can get to 8 centimeters dilated at home, and that's that could potentially be a long time for women with, obviously no risk to the baby. And then if you need to, or if that's the plan anyway, that you're in better shape rather than, going in way early and you're not in your own familiar space. You've now got lots of machines beeping and, they're checking the baby's, vitals all the time. And it's just scary.
It is scary. And look, I think we do have enough research now that tells us that women and their partners are dissatisfied with birthing experiences that are occurring in Australia today. We have 1 in 4 women with postpartum depression. I think it's 1 in 8 men now with postpartum depression. And some of those couples are even diagnosed with PTSD, directly pointing back to how they were treated in their birthing experience. That's not good enough, Nesh. So, whilst I can't give medical advice, I can be there to hold the space should some kind of medical intervention, which is necessary, needs to go ahead, and really help work that out and work through that. Sometimes being a translator even, deciphering some of the medical terminology that's being used so that the couple understands or the individual understands what is happening. When we have a sense of control and a sense of involvement, as our outcome is going to be better. I've worked with many, many, many clients who have had cesareans. We've exhausted all of the options at the end of the day. We've done all the things. We've bought all the time. And it's just on this given day, this little bubba wants to be born out the sunroof, as I like to call it. And because we've exhausted all the options, because we've ticked all the personal boxes, the woman and her partner have been held throughout the experience, they feel better about their experience when they get home. And that's when the real work starts. We need to offer a soft landing place for parents. They need a healthy, happy start to be healthy, happy parents. Cue the postnatal doula.
And there's a real beautiful thing in this as well that, and I think sometimes can be misunderstood in these conversations, is that I'm hearing that the doula is a collaborative approach, that supports parents who don't know much about this space, and can be supported and is not against the medical system, rather works with the medical system so that
Correct.
the interventions, that we all want are applied, with some consideration and timing and so on, so that we get best outcomes, in terms of, hate to talk about mortality rates and obviously,
Yes.
of both bub and mum. Thankfully in Australia, that's very, very low, but obviously continues to be worked on, that it's really working together. It's not a, doula against the world. It's a doula facilitating, what's the process that mums and dads would like
Yes.
for this period to look like, and gives all the room for, all the medical things, because you'd be crazy not to. And at the same time, and I say this obviously, lighthearted, but you'd be crazy not to go out and also think about how much support can I get, and understanding, even if you just, I assume, even just engage a doula to take you through the third trimester planning. That you could say, I don't even want you there because I want it to be a personal and intimate thing with me and my partner. I'm sure that you guys allow for every shape and size. And as you say, even the postpartum part, I actually didn't know that is a part of your service as well. So wow, again.
Wow, again. Yes, I think that's important. We can be hired at any stage for a variety of reasons. We may have had someone contact us at the ADC who may have had a series of miscarriages or a previous stillbirth, and they are going to require or want more care and support on an ongoing basis, even fortnightly, for example, to touch base with their doula, with someone who's outside of the medical profession, because a lot of those families might be micromanaged for probably good reason, right, during the pregnancy, and again are getting on a conveyor belt through a system, and they need that heartfelt connection, someone who will just listen. Sometimes it's just about listening, right, and being in touch with that person's emotions, with their fear. Will this baby die? What could happen? All of the things that you really can't burden your family and friends with, right? So we become that ear. So we've been hired for that, for example, and yes, you can have a doula not be at the birth. Yes, you can just have a postpartum doula. It doesn't have to be the same person. If you did have someone at the birth, there's a lot of options. And a lot of doulas specialize in certain things, and some are just crazy like me and do all of the things, And I think over the 20-something years, I think what I've learned about doulaing for myself is that it's the same. I bring the same energy and the same love and compassion and care to all of the spaces, all of the transitions. And again, that's the essence, I think, of what we do.
And Renee, I love that you talk about it that way, because it's a passion of people.
Yes.
And that type of crazy is a lovely crazy. I love passion and crazy and obsession, and because it really is genuine and talks to what are we trying to do here, and why, and embraces that. And what struck me, and obviously why I reached out to you, was the end of life part of things, just because I've never considered it until recently or heard about it. I just thought, what an incredible service that can be, particularly because for families, I know that it's usually quite easy for everyone to get together and welcome a life into this world. Everyone's in a good mood, and we're excited, and we give so much support, and support is easy to give. In end of life, we've got complicated families, and look, I'm kind of projecting as though the person's young. Old.
Older.
Obviously, they can be young. You know, there's obviously lots of reasons for, and medical conditions for that. But my understanding, and please elaborate and help me further my knowledge, is that a doula can be invited into a family to talk about death. At that point, I'm assuming it's understood to be terminal, and therefore there's a family that's trying to prepare. I don't know what that's like. I've seen my best friend sadly pass away. I don't know what's with me today. I'm a bit fragile today, but here we go again.
It's all right, Nesh. I'm so
not
sorry.
that I would ever say that he should have used a doula service. I mean, I don't even fully understand it, but I can see great value for whether it's a family, whether it's a person. Obviously, it's an individual choice as well. But to have a choice of someone saying, "Hey, mate, have you thought about a doula?" And the doula's there for your wife as much as it is for you. It might also be for your brothers, and your mum might want to be part of this or not. And there's lots of complications in this, but to have an invitation to say, what are the things that we could consider? How do we plan this out? And hopefully take some of the guessing out of it so that there isn't conflict in families or this is what they would have wanted versus, no, we've actually recorded, we've had this conversation about what the loved one that's passed has wanted. Am I capturing some of this?
Capturing most of it, my friend, and I'm going to start with how we can work. And I think it's important for your audience to hear how a doula can help. Even, some people think that we're there because we call ourselves End of Life Doulas, that we're purely there for the end of life. But there's multiple areas and spaces that a doula could really be beneficial to an individual and a family. And the first place, I think, is helping Australians understand how important it is to do advanced care planning. And we offer sessions, some of our doulas offer those sessions where we really help people while you're well and you're not under any kind of pressure to sort out some of your shit, and make sure that you have someone, you can formally put a directive together, advanced care directive, and formally put someone forward that you want to speak for you on your behalf, because you've got everything written down. You've got your plan. This is what you want. If I have an accident, touch wood, I'm in a car accident, I can't speak for myself. My family, my best friend, has my advanced care plan. He's on my directive. He will speak on my behalf about what I want, I don't want. Essentially, I want the plug to be pulled, right? I can't, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And
this could potentially be done even before someone gets sick.
Oh,
right?
you do it before you get sick, mate.
I could say, I want to do a plan. It's almost like a will, except this is a will for what will my funeral look like, and all the things that my family could fight about.
Yes, and that's a very critical point to make. When you have not got an advanced care plan, I mean, I think it's around 50% of Australians die without a will. Never mind an advanced care plan, which plans out the course and well-being and what they want, should they not be able to do that for themselves, right? Particularly if you have onset dementia, all of those things. You have to, someone has to know, so that there is no family bickering, so that you do get what it is that you wanted when you're at that stage of your life. Whenever that comes, none of us know. So it is critical, and it's really important. And there's lots of great online options for people to do that now online. Touchstone is one of them. And I'll touch on a few websites for your audience, and I will then send you at the end a list so
great.
that can go up, and even a couple of books. So Groundswell Project is another opportunity where people can go on and find out about advanced care planning. It's critical. I can't drum that in enough. So doulas can come in and help you do that, which is nice and great to know. It's usually over a couple of sessions. We send you away, give you some information, Q&A, sounding board, that kind of thing. You may be well, you may have just had a terrible diagnosis, which doesn't, it's terminal, but you may have 12 months, 2 years, whatever the case may be. But it's not an urgent, it's not, I'm not going to come to your vigil right now. You're not,
It's
got
asking
some
the
time.
hard questions as well,
Yes.
that we know are the tripping points. I know when I've done my insurance, in the past around death and so on, a really important question was, Nesh, how much time do you need if your wife dies? Oh my God, like how much time do I need? And it's not like just for emotionally, to get things in order and,
right.
how you go out and cope and your other responsibilities and adjusting to looking after the, children alone and so on. How much time do you need if your spouse doesn't die, but they are now, permanently, disabled in a way where you become the care, et cetera, et cetera. So, geez, I wouldn't have ever asked these questions because I've never thought of them. But this is kind of saying there might be a vehicle here. Should the worst happen, you get some support. And so I'm hearing in a similar way, a doula can come in and ask questions that we can't come up with ourselves, that we would never think of, and also come from a third party, so it's not
right.
It doesn't feel invasive or intrusive. It comes from a third party in a place of love and compassion and respect. So we can kind of think of the hard things and then actually consider them and go, yeah, this is how I would like it to be, or this is my preference, and we can actually have the conversation while things are well.
Exactly. And look, to be fair, Nesh, nobody really wants to have these big conversations.
No.
But at the end
we
of
never do them. Yeah.
We're all going to die. 10 out of 10, mate. Nobody gets out of this game alive. So why not take the reins, be in control while you're well, and put a will together, do an advanced care plan, make it a directive, which means formalizing it, getting someone who can speak on your behalf. What about an emotional will? Most people haven't thought about that, and a doula can help you with that. Leaving a legacy. That's leaving a legacy. So there's some beautiful things we can assist you to do. Maybe you've got some pieces of jewelry or a book collection or a salt and pepper collection like I do that you want to leave to someone in particular, but that stuff doesn't go in your big will, right? Like your house and your car, but these are very important emotional gifts to you. Did you want to leave some photographs? Did you want to tell some stories? Amazing, right? Imagine being able to sort of have that legacy. You're almost living on. And again, there's a great website you can jump onto, everheld.com, I think it is. Ever, EVAHELD, started by two amazing Australian women. And you can just hop onto that site. You can upload your photographs. You can read stories. I believe when they were doing the pilot, that they had a woman who she was dying, and she wanted to leave book reading sessions for her grandchildren that were yet to be born. How incredible. Wow. That's a living will. So really thinking about those kinds of things. And again, a lot of people haven't thought about that. A lot of people don't know that that's even something that they might like to do. So yeah, the doula can assist with that. And then, of course, it's who hires us. Sometimes we're hired directly by the dying person. Sometimes a family member will work with a particular family member, often a partner, one-on-one sometimes. Sometimes we end up working with the entire family. Obviously, we're working with a palliative care team and other doctors and nurses that are involved. But uniquely, again, we are that glue. We're holding the space for all of those people and all of those professionals. Particularly when someone dies at home, it can be very, 75% of Australians, as I mentioned, want to die at home, but they're afraid. They might not have seen a person take their last breath before. They don't know what the signs are. They want to do the right thing by their loved one because that's what their loved one wants. But again, that fear gets in the way. So, the doula can come in and have a continual amount of care whilst the palliative care people are coming in and out. No, they don't stay. So a little bit like midwives and, doctors, when you're having your baby, everybody's in and out, in and out, in and out. But we have this consistency, which is critical at times like death and dying. And again, having that rapport that's already been built with the family or the individual. And we can lean into those hard conversations. And I'm not afraid to sit with someone in their pain and their grief. I lean into that actually. And, having someone that is not emotionally plugged in during someone's death is really important, because everyone else in that room is. They're all invested in that person. Yeah. There's an emotional investment there. I don't have that. With respect, I'm wholly in there.
Facilitating and
I'm in there, and my compassion and empathy is on point. However, it's not my person. So I'm able to really stand beside that family and make sure that they are held so that then they can hold their loved one,
Yeah, the way that it was explained to me and why I jumped at, wanting to find out more and obviously got in contact was that, the whole fact that it's working with a family. So you've got, let's just, do a thought experiment. You've got the spouse that's there, that's, also elderly, assuming that, they've been blessed. You've probably got some adult kids there. They've got their own lives.
Yes.
There might be someone else who's, not in town, but, they might also be able to be represented, in a way, and was able to come in and facilitate, the hard conversation of, this person is dying, as we all are. And, they're at the very late stages or maybe even early stages, but it's obviously imminent in the near future. And we're going to have a conversation about all sorts of things, whether it's, will you be resuscitated all the way through to, do you want to be buried, cremated? What sort of music do you want? Do you want to give, the emotional will in scenarios? And that this is actually a conversation that the family has, because this is not often what one person does. It's not the dying person that says, I'm just going to make all the decisions. They probably want to understand and hear what children want, what does my living spouse want, because I want to gift them, what I think they want, but it's nice to hear from them. And even who's someone who might not be represented because they're interstate, but ultimately a plan can be put together and said, we've actually thought this through and we've made some decisions and we've agreed on this. All the parties or everyone that loves this person. And obviously that's not a hard and fast. It's not in stone. It can be amended and so on. But
of course,
to have something that facilitates it and something on record, so that when that happens, or even along the process, but assuming we're at the very end where they have passed, there's a way we can honour that person, and that includes, maybe how we scatter the ashes, or what a plaque might.
Even how you want your funeral, what songs you want played at your funeral. An end of life plan brings peace. And I think if we looked at it that way, it would be an easier conversation starter, because it's the person who's dying that is offering up their wishes, really, and their story. And it's the people around them, once they know that, it's much easier for everybody. There's a sense of relief, I find, actually, if everyone's on the same page, carrying out somebody's last wishes, then there isn't that bickering goes, that sort of, well, I want them to do A, B, C, and D. Well, we're not doing that because Fred wants E, F, and G, mate. So, and I'm going to point back to the plan.
It minimizes the potential opportunity for those things to happen. And from a psychological point of view, I see, when you're planning for something, you're also doing much more acceptance. You're doing the acceptance work that often becomes part of the last part, but only because you're forced to. When you aren't forced to, but you're choosing to step into it, to lean into it, you begin to do acceptance work, which says, I'm going to lose my loved one, or the loved one saying, I'm actually going to lose my family in my death because I can see them again. And, I'm reflecting on my life, but, there's still some life to live. And I'm assuming as well that this plan can also mean maybe I get to write my bucket list, and we're going to start doing some things in the next, 2 to 3 years that I might have available, or months, or whatever the scenario is. But
do you want to have a party? Do you want to have a party before you invite all your friends over? That's the good stuff. Do you want to do that instead of everybody partying when you're gone at your funeral? Let's talk about what it might look like to invite people in now and say your goodbyes in a really fun way. It doesn't have to be morbid. Dying. And I think if it becomes more of a celebration, then it's about alleviating that pressure and bringing more peace, because it should be a celebration of someone's life. And however long we have here, it's a blessing, right? And it's a gift. And yes, I know a lot of the time it can feel like a rip-off when someone goes early.
Absolutely.
But there's still reason to celebrate that person was in our lives at all. And, it's the doula can really also bring that energy in when appropriate,
reduce the anxiety for everyone else, because sometimes we can get stuck on death, right? We can say death is around the corner, and so until death happens, we're paralyzed, and we're also existing rather than living, and every moment's to important to be cherished, and having that early, I don't want to call it intervention. I think early approach and openness, a vulnerability, a willingness to step into that space with experience, someone that's done this before, because they know what to ask, and things that we've never. I mean, I imagine going into a meeting with a doula and family, and kind of saying, well, what's the first question? How do we, what do you want to ask us?
Where's the icebreaker?
And I imagine they would say, well, what's going on? How are you feeling? Tell me about it. And we just sort of evolve into, an open conversation where everyone's voice can be heard, or at least invited to be heard. And, I imagine we'd all be crying and laughing and all sorts of things together.
Yeah, it's a combination, isn't it? I mean, life is a roller coaster. The dying time can be really surreal. It's not without its joy, and it's not without laughter. Yes, there is pain, and certainly sometimes we can grieve even prior to somebody dying, but then there's the grief that comes after, and that's infinite. And it's interesting to talk to some of our doulas who are working more in that grief space. I did an amazing course with David Kessler last year. He's probably the leader in grief around the world, an American man. Really interesting story. He trains grief educators around the world. Fantastic course that I did. And it's really interesting to see doulas working now more in that space. So post the death, working with having sort of, like maybe 2 or 3 months after the death of a loved one, working in that space one-on-one with someone, whether or not we were there at the time of death or not. And that's another beautiful space, transitional space for doulas, which is
the
really
continuity of care.
emerging. And it's that continuity of care. And, we've all lost someone near and dear to our heart. How often does all the love and support, well-meaning and wonderful, drop off? 6 weeks, the phone stops ringing. 4 weeks, the phone stops ringing after the funeral. And that's often where the real grief begins, to be honest.
When it gets lonely.
That those moments where you are on your own and you have to sit in that incredible, excruciating pain. What do? Pick up the phone to your doula. Doesn't matter what time of the night or day. And I think that's a very special gift that we can bring as well. It's really leaning into that and not being afraid to sit with someone's grief, and sometimes not saying anything at all, just listening or sitting or being. It's a multifaceted role, I think, at the end of life, which makes it really interesting and diverse, challenging, but also I think it's an immense opportunity for the humanity and compassion to be brought back into this space.
Beautifully said. Rather than us all racing away and Googling, end of life doula service or doula services in general, can you point us to any particular resources, websites, training programs for those who are interested in actually pursuing that, so that at least we can get started with some material that has been vetted.
Yes.
And also maybe you can talk a little bit about or share how we might be able to get in contact with yourself or obviously your college.
Yeah. So the college, we train birth and postpartum and end of life doulas. We also interestingly have a training for abortion doulas, which is also an emerging space for doulas in general. People can find us at www.australiandoulacollege.com.au. That's DOULA. For a lot of people still quite don't know how to spell it or say it, pronunciate it. You can follow us on Facebook at Australian Doula College. I am on Insta at Womb to Tomb Doula. And you can pick up the phone too. It's pretty cool, isn't it? You can pick up the phone, which is Sydney number 02-8036-5580. And I'm very happy to share a resource list with your listeners, which I will send to you this afternoon. So there'll be some books in there for some reading and some really great websites, some that I haven't mentioned today.
Fantastic, and it's useful to have a place to go to, continue this conversation, and I've certainly learned more and understood more from this, and really appreciate you and your work, your college, and all the doulas out there. I'm incredibly thankful that service is out there, even though I haven't used it, but I'm very confident that it will be something that I will be putting in my toolkit, and I dare say sooner rather than later, in terms of I like this whole concept of advanced health directives. there's such value. We do it with wills, or sadly we don't. Only 50% of us do, but we do it with wills. And why wouldn't we, plan and amend and adjust just in case? Because it's it just speaks to that world of acceptance, which I am very passionate about with my ACT work. But it just sounds so psychologically healthy, and thank you so much for your time, and appreciate that, and I hope that the doula space does grow. As we were talking, I was also thinking about, there's a need also for not only abortions, but for miscarriages. The 1 in 3. Like, if people connected about saying, planning for life.
I couldn't agree more.
That could be, because just setting up the expectation can remove so much of the grief and the pain, and say there's lots of women, 1 in 3, that we're going to see this with. So this is normal, and it's not, you're not doing what it's supposed to do, etc. And all the infinite things that I'm sure are very difficult for mums and dads. But I hope that the doula space continues to grow, and obviously with your contributions, I'm sure it will. But once again, thank you so much, Renee.
Thanks so much, Ness. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please support it by going to iTunes and putting a review, subscribe, share it via social media, and tell others about it. Start a conversation. It's listeners like you that make this able and possible, and why we bring in these guests to go out and share their knowledge and resources. And just lastly, if you are a psychologist and you want to go out and be part of a bigger team, develop your experience and get into some exciting work, come to strategicpsychology.com.au/careers and reach out. I'd love to hear from you.